Hello, and welcome to the Vedic Conversation, where each episode we take a different topic and look at it through the lens of storytelling and from the perspective of the Veda, an ancient but still very much relevant body of knowledge from India. I'm Derrick Yanford, a Vedic meditation teacher based in New York City, and I'm joined by my Vedic colleagues Thompson in London and Rory Kinsella in Sydney. In this episode, we sit down and have a casual conversation with my good friend and colleague, Kelli Douglas. When I was thinking about becoming a teacher, Kelli was so kind in helping to manage my expectations and speaking with me one-on-one whenever I reached out for support. Kelli shares with us her story of being a single mom, her transition from being a New York City real estate broker to finding her way to Vedic meditation, and the myriad of changes she continues to flow through with beauty, grace, and ease as she managed to relocate her family from New York to California with a one-way ticket and a single suitcase during the midst of a pandemic. If you have ever considered learning Vedic meditation but just haven't made the commitment, have a listen, as Kelli's story may be exactly what you need to hear to take that leap of faith. But don't forget to stick around until the end, where we'll share how you can become involved in the conversation. And remember, please subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. And just really delighted to have you on the show, Kelli. Thank you so much for taking the time and joining us.
Oh, thank you for asking me. The pleasure is mine. It's great to be here and to see you and to meet you all.
Great. Kel, I'm just curious, maybe for our audience, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about what brought you to either Vedic meditation or your experience with meditation in general.
Hmm. Good question. I have been meditating for a long time. I was a seeker. I'm in San Diego where I grew up right now, and I just was always very curious about other states of consciousness, you could say. In my teenage years, I got very curious about other states of consciousness and did a lot of reading books and just did a lot of experimenting with different types of ways to explore consciousness. And I tried meditation. There were a few different places that I went to, but I never really felt like I had the practical instruction that I needed to meditate on a regular basis. I would have amazing experiences with different people and teachers and groups that I became a part of, and really amazing experiences, but it was never something I could really do and replicate in a day-to-day life. Um, I was very curious about there was a Hare Krishna center here in San Diego, and I would go to their feast on Sundays, and we would do some wonderful chanting and singing, and I loved it. But then that was it. Then I would be back in the suburbs and back with I had a lot of anxiety and a lot of depression growing up, and I never really found anything to give me any kind of relief or a regular practice. Um, let's see. I feel like I'm gonna launch into my whole life story here.
Please do.
Do it, yeah.
Go for it.
um, so then it took me in my 20s. I did a lot of traveling. I lived in Europe for a couple of years and had a lot of adventures and experimented with different states of consciousness um, that were ingested. I was curious about taking different types of drugs and what that would do. And then when I was 26, I got sober. I stopped doing that. And then again, I was back on the path of searching for something to give me that relief. Because the drugs and alcohol worked for a certain amount of time. And then, um, being sober, I needed some relief. And so I would go, I took so many. I mean, I pretty much tried everything. I would do these guided meditations. I was in Seattle, Washington at the time, and I would go and sit with um, Buddhist monks from Thailand, and and they would give me this very, um, vague instruction. Why don't you, they would even mention, I don't even know if they said anything. It was just sort of they motioned to like a brick on the floor, sit on the brick and, be quiet for an hour. There was no instruction. And, it was a pretty interesting experience, but it was also torture. It wasn't something I wanted to do again on my own. And so I had a lot of, experiences like this. And I moved to New York and I got very into yoga. I was practicing, I would take yoga classes every day. And I would have various yoga instructors try to teach me meditation. It was a big part of yoga, the yoga I was taking. We would always do like a 5-minute meditation at the end of the class, sometimes 10 minutes. And I just always felt like I was doing it wrong. I would close my eyes and I would have like, maybe 30 seconds or a minute or two of kind of bliss and feeling the, wonderful from the yoga asanas. And then all of a sudden my mind would kick in, what's for lunch? What do I have to do today? Should I should I do this? Should I do that? It was just all of a sudden I was off to the races. And then I would think, oh, I'm supposed to be meditating. Oh my gosh, I'm thinking these thoughts and I'm a terrible meditator. And that was it. That was really my experience. Even though I did get some benefit from doing, the few minutes that I did in the yoga class. So I learned, I mean, I could tell stories after stories of everything I tried because I've tried it pretty much all. But I came to Vedic meditation because I had a friend um, who had taken the Vedic meditation course with a teacher, and she was not one of my yoga friends. She was one of my real estate friends. She was a reporter, and she had expressed no interest in any kind of, quote unquote hippie thing or yoga thing. And I had lunch with her, and when I noticed a very big change, and when I would normally have lunch with her, she would tell me, she would talk about the same thing every time we met. She would talk about, complain about her husband or her family, and we'd have a very similar conversation. And this one particular lunch, she didn't bring up her husband or her family once. And towards the end of the conversation, I was actually getting a little bit worried about them because she hadn't mentioned them. And so I said, what's going on with, your husband? What's going on with your family? Is everything okay? You haven't mentioned it. And she was like, well, she's like, I don't know. They're not really bothering me that much. And I don't know if this has anything to do with it, but I did take this meditation course and I've been meditating for 20 minutes twice a day. And I was like, wow, you've been meditating 20 minutes twice a day. She's like, yeah, I don't know if it's having a big difference or not. I was like, it's having a big difference. And I need to take this course right now. And so, that was my introduction into it. And that weekend, Charlie was visiting New York and happened to be teaching in a loft down in Tribeca. And I signed up, I think the day before, and they said, "Do you want to go to an intro?" And I said, "No, I do not. Just tell me what I need to do." And oh, it's complex, the fruit and flowers. And I said, "Just tell me what to bring and I will do it." And I said, "There's no need for me to go to an intro." And that's the weekend that I learned. And I haven't gone back. I mean, it's been amazing.
And how long ago was that you learned? What year do you remember?
Ooh, gosh, 2015,
Okay.
2014 or 15. I don't
Okay.
know. Time's a little bit weird right now. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, 6 or 7 years ago.
Awesome. That's amazing. That's a great story. Thank you for sharing that, because I think it's, probably more people having that experience dabbling in meditation, thinking that it's not working, and maybe haven't found Vedic meditation. And I love it was because of your friend, the change in your friend, that you were sold. You know what I mean? That speaks volumes.
Yes. Yeah. No, it was a huge difference. And I experienced a huge change as well, within a few really that weekend, and even more so in the upcoming weeks and months. It was a huge change.
And so, am I correct in thinking at that time you were still a real estate agent in New York when you learned?
Yes. Yeah. I was working at Corcoran downtown still. I was a broker, um and I was exhausted. I mean, I did not even know how exhausted I was, but I'm a single mom. So my son at the time was 2. He was a toddler. And, it was an intense time. And I was really looking for something that could help me with my energy levels and just feeling a little bit better, because I was tired and I just didn't even know how tired I was until after I learned this technique and started meditating.
And so, just to give some context, you went from full time broker, New York City, to not doing that anymore to full time Vedic meditation teacher.
Yes, pretty
Can,
much.
can you, okay, because that's kind of huge. I have my license, I do mostly referrals.
Mhm.
It was a crazy world to get into, especially after everything that I had done before that. So, can you talk us a little bit about that transition and even the choice about leaving that career to this one? Because that's so interesting.
Yeah, it was something that happened just really gradually and really, naturally. I real estate was I loved real estate, and it was a really fun and an amazing career, and I loved it. But once I learned this technique, it was such a game changer for me that, um I mean, the first year that I was, doing this, practicing this technique, I was still working in real estate. It gave me a lot more energy. It gave me a lot more focus. I really felt like things were going great. And after a year of meditating, I went to India for the first time. So I was celebrating my 1 year metaversary in India on a retreat with Tom Knowles. And it was um it was a life-changing trip. It was my first time in India, and I was just really at that time like, what am I going to do? I felt like there was a bit of a crossroads. And um, I had an appointment to speak with Tom at one point, and I really wanted to figure out like how to, you know, reboot my real estate career. I don't know what. We were kind of talking some like business tips, and he mentioned that he had a real estate person in his family, and I don't know. I was really like, how can I, and he was like, oh yeah, listening. And then he made a suggestion of, he's like, you should really become a teacher. I was like, no, I don't think so. Um, and he had a suggestion that I connect with a teacher in New York, Emily, Fletcher and just start taking some of the more advanced courses like the Veda courses. And, I went back to New York and I started doing that. And one thing led to another. And the next thing you know, I'm, months into this program. And it's a teacher training program for, initiators. And I was in it. I was in it. I was super passionate about it and excited about it. And then, as soon as I graduated, it was a 15-month program. And I went back to India during that time. And then once I graduated, I just started teaching. It was very, natural and organic. I was just teaching out of my apartment and I would teach one person at a time. Somebody would call me and say, I want to learn. And then the next week, somebody else wanted to learn. And the next week, and it just started like that.
That's a beautiful story. That is
Yeah.
beautiful.
So it wasn't really even a choice of, I dropped out of real estate. It was more of, I leaned into this really, charming profession of helping people learn this technique, which was just really amazing to witness and to be a part of that.
I think your story amplifies this point. You just use the word charm, following the charm. And that when you do this, it's just effortless and friction free. And there's just a natural sequence of events. And you just know intuitively that this is the right thing to do. And it's incredibly powerful, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is.
I want to hear if we could go back just a little bit.
Sure, let's rewind.
So, it's interesting because I have students who talk to me a little bit about, maybe imbibing drugs and the transcendent feeling that they have, or this cosmic connection that they kind of feel, or whatnot. And so I'm just curious, in your years before you found meditation, do you think that that's what you were trying to do on some level? Were you having this like, oh my God, I understand the universe kind of thing? Was it about that or like that? What was
No, it was just more of like a coping mechanism, I guess, for how I was feeling as a younger, as a teenager and in my 20s. It wasn't, I mean, I did have moments of very brief, during the taking drugs, of feeling like, wow, I'm one with the universe. That was very life changing, but they were very, very brief and very passing. And I didn't feel like I was really receiving any kind of knowledge necessarily from that. It wasn't something that really stayed with me and helped me cope. If anything, some of it made me, I was just um, it made me very unstable, honestly. It wasn't something that really helped me. But I mean, that's not to say people can't have that experience. I know there's a lot of, people who have wonderful experiences with all of that, and that's great. Just for my personality type, it was I think I was looking for some relief um from being in my mind, and it did give that temporary, but sometimes it was not a pleasant experience. It didn't work for me, I should say.
Yeah, I guess it has the hangover payoff or the come down or whatever you've had. But I think it is interesting because drugs and alcohol are a way that people come in, like you said, to change their conscious state, and the motivation for changing that state is often, as also you said, relief. But there is just this kind of natural desire to have different conscious states. Like with kids in the playground, I remember spinning around as fast as I could in the playground to get like, whoa, this is like age 6 or something. Or the whirling dervishes. There's this thing that we want to have different conscious states, and I think for me, because I work with quite a few people who want to quit drinking, and it's it's a good way to talk to regular people, because it's a coping mechanism, and it's also this way of changing conscious state, which is something that we all, lots of people want to do. So I just find that when I talk about alcohol, it's such a relatable way to talk about coping mechanisms, but also experiencing different things, feeling relaxed, but also, I guess, that feeling of oneness and connection that we can get, that I think with drugs you can glimpse it, but then you completely forget about it afterwards, and there's no real memory of it. I remember we did this thing once where we used to take trips when we were teenagers, and we'd think that we'd solved all the problems of the universe, and that we'd come up with this amazing secret, but we recorded it once on a dictaphone. This was in the 90s, and listened back to it the next day, and it's like, we didn't discover anything. We were just like, yeah. But I think it's also important to say that, because sometimes people think, oh, meditation, it's going to be like taking something, and there'll be this profound instant experience, and it's like, well, no, like, it's moving in that direction, but it's a lot more subtle. You were talking about, you had kind of instant, well, maybe not instant, but straight away you had results from the meditation. What could you talk a bit more about what they were, and whether they were subtle or whether they were more powerful? Like, I know with my students, sleep's something that kind of can change really quickly. Like day 2, people are like, oh, I slept for the first time in years. Did you have any of those, first few days?
Yes, I did. I mean, I was thinking about this today, because this can be a very subtle and slow process, but it can also, at least in the beginning, it was very dramatic for me. And I I was stressed. I didn't realize I was stressed. And I think about this example with my son, because my son, he went to this new doctor here in San Diego recently, and she noticed something with his eye. We had to go to this eye specialist here, and we had to wait like 4 months to see this eye specialist, because it could have been this thing. And when we were there at the eye specialist, the doctor said, well, I'm going to give an eye exam to see if, if your son needs glasses. And I was like, oh, he sees fine, he's doing great. And he's never given any kind of indication that he's needed glasses before. And the doctor did the eye exam, and it turns out my son has very, bad vision and needs glasses. And we went that same day to pick up the glasses. And I was like, gosh, have things been blurry for you? I was asking him in the car, like, how, did you notice anything? And it seems like I've never noticed. He's like, no, everything's fine. I don't know what the doctor's talking about. And as soon as he gets the glasses and he puts them on for the first time, he was like, oh my God, everything's so clear. I can see. And it was like he didn't notice before how bad his vision was, because that was just what he was used to. And, putting on the glasses was such a stark difference. And I feel like it was like that with meditation. I don't think I would identify myself as being stressed at the time. I mean, I was in yoga, and I had, studied all this, and, I didn't, I knew I was a little bit sleep deprived. I had a toddler, but I didn't realize it. And as soon as I, learned this technique and received my mantra, it was like, whoa, I had that feeling of, wow, this is what life can be like, with a little bit of rest. With like a little bit of rest and a little less stress, it felt like a huge burden was lifted. And I did have some of those experiences that I was seeking, some of those wild experiences too, of just like, whoa, I feel like, when you have that, establishing yourself and being just that, wow, really feeling like a really wonderful sense of peace and oneness. And it was great.
You make a very interesting point about the realization once you start to meditate that you've kind of been holding it all together. And I come across a lot of students who are right on the cusp, having experienced a great deal of stress and also fatigue. And it's not until they start to meditate that they realize that it's almost like turning on the tap, and that build up of all those pressures and stresses suddenly gets released. But it's being released in a very neat and tidy way. It's not messy. And I think people find that very reassuring, that, perhaps there's a little bit of trepidation to start with. Is this going to be okay? And then they relax. And of course, the more they relax, the more it works. But it's sometimes, you can see very dramatic results. And the relief on people's faces when they realize that they were holding on to something that perhaps they didn't realize existed, but wasn't doing them any good. That's a fantastic expression they have on their faces. Sounds like you had the same sort of experience.
Yes, I did, for sure.
I had the glasses experience as well. I didn't think I needed glasses, and then we were drunk in the pub one day, and we were rolling around on the floor. I think it was New Year's Day. I just grabbed my friend's glasses and put them on just as a joke, and I was just like, zing. And I can see it, and I think it plays into that point that I had at someone on a course recently. It was a kind of corporate one, and this guy was like, "Yeah, I mean, I don't need it, so I'm not gonna be meditating every day because I don't really need it." And I was just like, "Well, it's not just for stress heads. It's not just like a remedial thing. It will take you from wherever you are to the next level." So I think it's important to let people know that it's not this rock bottom thing where you go, "Oh, I just need something." Like, it will make you better at whatever you want to do. And I think it's good to talk about that, because it's not always talked about, that it can help you kind of excel, and that, high performing people do it to get even more high performing. And it's one of those ones where, like you said, you don't realize until you've done it. Like, I describe it that, people would have always said that I was a laid back guy, and on the outside I was, but then I was kind of twirling around on the inside. But it's also interesting what you were saying before about how it's often not us that notice it. Like your friend who said, "I don't know if this is working." You're like, "It's definitely, it's definitely working."
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit about your move to California? What kind of inspired that? Because was it during lockdown? Was it the beginning of?
It was during lockdown, yes. Yeah, this was not something that I planned at all. I, love New York, and I had no plans on leaving New York. It was, a real surprise. But, you know, March 2020, everything changed, and being in New York City during that time was really, really intense. And I mean, I have to say, like, leading even before March of last year, um, I started thinking about, teaching meditation, and I had a studio in New York. And, I loved it. It was wonderful. But I was also feeling very charmed to teach in a more retreat setting. And I had planned on taking a group to Bali in June of last year. And it's really like, I want to plan retreats, and it would be such a great thing to have teach and have it be around a retreat setting and having everybody take care of, and just really self-care and wonderful time to rest. And I took a trip in January of 2020 to California and to LA. And I thought, wow, what would it be like if I lived in LA? I could live here. Maybe I could be bi-coastal. And I don't know. I had all these ideas. I definitely felt the charm. And I was like, wow, California is so beautiful. I was like, oh, but New York, New York forever. And you have your apartment, and I went back and I love New York. I loved my apartment, I loved my studio, and I loved everything about it. I thought, oh, that was a crazy thought I had, you know, being on the vacation, that I wanted to move there. And then March happened, and New York was intense during that time, March, April, and May. And you know, um, I just really, I mean, what happened was I decided to. It was scary. I don't know. Were you there, Derrick? I'm trying to remember.
It's funny because when the world went upside down, I had kind of gotten out. Like, I think I left the 18th of March, and I was in the South. I was in Atlanta for a while,
Wow. Okay.
searching, and we went to Florida, found a property, came back. It was back and forth a little bit, and I've gone back and forth, but right at the height of the craziness, I didn't experience that so much.
Okay. Yeah. It was bananas, and it was really difficult. The change in New York was so drastic because there was just sirens and ambulance and ships coming in that were floating hospitals, and beds set up in Central Park, and it was wild. And my son was experiencing a lot of anxiety about it. It was just wasn't a break, and we stayed in our apartment pretty much. And I have a dog too. We just stayed in our apartment and really didn't leave for months at a time. And then I thought, um, my parents and my family live in San Diego, and they talked me into coming and visiting for a couple of weeks. And so I bought a ticket and left very soon. It was like maybe 2 days later. There was only one flight out of New York to San Diego a week, and they happened to have two seats on this plane that was going out 2 days later, and we got on it with one suitcase between the three of us, and I haven't been back to New York since. So it was wasn't a planned move, and again, in the whole Vedic perspective, I just kept following my charm. It wasn't like, oh, I don't like New York. I love New York, but it was more of, it feels good to be near my family. It feels good to be in nature. It feels good. Things happened very easily. My son was accepted into a school here that's really wonderful, in the country under eucalyptus trees. And so he has been able to go to school in person, and just everything has been really easy. And we've just been going with the flow. So it looks like, we're here for now. I don't know what's going to happen, but we love it for now. So that's the move to San Diego.
You literally have, since you left New York, you have not been back.
No, since March 17th, I haven't been back to New York. And I had a friend pack up the studio for me, and I closed the studio. And then I had a friend pack up my apartment on the Upper West Side, and yeah, and then sent everything here.
Okay, so I was curious because, I've been to your studio. It's gorgeous. I loved it. It was so cute and quaint. And I was curious too, if how that got taken care of in your apartment. And I mean, you kind of are like this walking poster child for Vedic meditation and everything that you've kind of said. But I am curious, even with all of that, after the world has turned upside down, and just, I'll be candid and transparent, for me, this week, the case against Derrick Chauvin has started, and it's being televised on CNN, and all of the stuff that the pandemic has kicked up, especially in our country, around race and all of these other kinds of things, changed my perspective about things. And it took me a long time to kind of process, and I'm still processing. And if anything, I think I've gained a little bit more space and compassion to understand different opinions or whatnot. So I guess my question to you is, what would you think is maybe, either the greatest gift or the greatest thing that the pandemic has offered you in terms of just maybe the way that you look at life or how you behave differently now?
Yeah, I mean, so many gifts. It's hard to really say. It's been an amazing year for me just personally, and I feel really happy that this is where I am right now. And it but yeah, it has really kicked up a lot in the collective. And I was thinking about this today. I mean, you know, just personally, it's interesting because this is where I grew up, was San Diego, California. And here I am back 33 years later to San Diego. And, there's so much going on with all of the changes that you mentioned, the social changes and the world. It just seems like it's being illuminated, some things that need to change and things that have been not fair. And that's been that's great. I'm happy about that. I mean, we didn't actually talk about what my career was before I moved to New York, but I used to work in social work. I studied, that's what brought me to New York City in the first place. So I worked um, in my 20s, I worked with addicts in recovery, and I worked with women who were escaping violent situations, domestic violence, and I was very, and still am, very interested in all of these issues and have been this entire time. So it's wonderful to see it come to the surface the way that
Mm.
it is, even though it's been very painful, the news lately. It's, I'm happy for it. I'm happy that this is being discussed and people
Mm.
are examining their behaviors. And just for me on a personal level, my son, this magical eucalyptus school that I just thrived, that we got into really easily, and I'm very grateful for it. It's in the country in San Diego, and it's not a progressive place at all. It couldn't be more different than New York City. And there are some, it's that part has been a challenge for me because there's a lot of it's just, I'm not around people who have a very similar viewpoint that I have. And so it's been challenging. And we've been, exposed to some things that have been very uncomfortable to, and, for my son and for me. And, I'm a single mom, and the school, the eucalyptus tree school, has never met a single mom before. And so there's been a lot of conflict a little bit with the teacher and the school. And, when I call my friends in New York, they're like, and tell them some of the stories, which I'm not going to get into, but when I call them and I'm like, gosh, can you believe that, the teacher said this, my friends are like, so when are you coming back to New York? And that would be the easiest, softest way, would be go back to New York with all of my people. But you know what? It's I'm here for a reason, and I think that this might be this little corner of where I am in San Diego. It needs a little a little light, a little like the whole lamppost that we talk about. It's like this place doesn't have a Vedic meditation teacher, and there needs to be some light here. So in the Vedic tradition of going out and being where it's a little bit dark, that's our job, and I can't wait to go back to New York and have a lamppost convention or you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
so much fun. But for now, this is where I am, and I feel like there's some work to do personally, and I feel and just on a community level here.
So that's so interesting because I was going to ask you, like, having built the community that you did in New York and then moving across the country and kind of having to start all over again in a sense, what is that like? Do you feel like you're rebuilding your business, or, like, you know what I mean? I can't imagine having built something and then, oh, bye, and then starting all over.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I have no idea what's going to happen. I mean, I haven't. Let's see, as we say. I don't know. I mean, I miss everybody in New York, and I am excited to teach people here in California. I don't know who they are yet. I haven't really been promoting my business or working actively with it yet.
Mhm.
I've had some worthy inquiry come in and, for just private lessons, and that's been great. But, it's still kind of early days for groups gathering and doing group meditations and that sort of thing. But, I'm excited to see what happens. I have no idea. I just need, going to stay flexible and adaptable and see what happens.
Awesome.
you
That's
know and the way the world is too, it's so cool. We could all connect from all these different corners of the world, with this kind of technology. So I still feel very connected to everyone. It doesn't feel like I've necessarily left entirely.
right. No, totally. Amazing. It's very inspiring. You know what I mean? Like I just taught a group of 8 this past week, which was, you know, a large gathering, especially in these times. And it was because I had taught 2 students in November prior to that. And it was in Connecticut. And it was like, I never imagined like teaching in Connecticut or like, and everybody was like, well, will you come back and will you teach our kids? And can we regroup in 90 days? And I was like, sure. I'm also just going wherever I'm kind of being called, kind of a thing, but it's not anything that I imagined. But like, I don't know, hearing your story, I just am more inspired to go, yeah, you can just plant yourself down anywhere and anything can happen. And I mean, you had so much change in a relatively small amount of time. And I just feel like your energy right now, you're just still very like, yeah, okay, just kind of go with it. Like it's really refreshing because I've this April will be 2 years since I graduated. And, for a year, almost I couldn't teach. So I'm still figuring my way. And as much as I have these feelings of, oh, yeah, I've had a lot of change too. It's nice to speak to you and actually have somebody who's gone through it and go, yep, just doing it, just rolling with it. It all works. And then having a child, like I have no pets. I have no kids. I have no pets. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's fun. The ultimate householder situation over here. It's great. Really is. It just continues to teach me to be adaptable and to just roll with it. Just like even before this podcast, I was like, oh, I had this whole day plan. I was like, oh, I'm going to do this and have a real long meditation and real, maybe take a bath and just really like, wonderful morning to myself. And then about 3 hours ago, these workers showed up that I've been hoping would come for about a month to fix the roof on my shed outside. They're like, we're here today. We brought our jackhammers. And I was like, wow, okay, awesome. That's wonderful. And so they started jackhammering this, shed in the back. And then I said, but you have to leave by 12:30 because I need to meditate. And then I'm doing this podcast. And so he was like, okay, no problem. So he left at 12:30. He goes, I'll go to lunch, 12:30 to 2, and then I'll be back. I said, okay, great. So then I sit down to meditate, and then the gardener started mowing the lawn and meat packing like right outside the window. And I thought, wow, this is great. Like, beautiful. This is what it's about. Being able to close our eyes and just, be weed whacked into serenity.
Yeah, the world always offers these opportunities. There's the place that I normally teach in. There's like a gym next door, which is normally just quite quiet. But then every now and again, they just pump out the dance music, and I'll be in the middle of teaching someone to meditate, and I'm just like, and noise is not a barrier to meditation.
I love it.
I'm reminded of, I mean, this, I don't know how relevant this is, but it just kind of came to mind because from what I heard that was going on in New York, I think we talked about this because so many people started moving out and like staying indoors or whatever. The landscape changed and the way like garbage was picked up and those kinds of things and food being all over the place was much different. And so people started seeing rats much more often than they were before. And wasn't there a story where like your dog was chased by rats? Wasn't that, am I making that up? Or is that, somebody told me their dog was chased by rats. I thought it was you.
No, it was. There were so many rats in New York City. And especially my block, maybe there was a lot of restaurants, in Amsterdam there, and they all closed. And so you would see so many rats. And that was the day that I bought my ticket, was had a rat from the top of the trash can and like sort of made this leap, it looked like, towards my dog, who's a little bit kind of rounder. So he's kind of a chunky French bulldog. So we, all jumped out of the way, and I was like, okay, it's time to go. Nature is telling us it's time to go. Yeah, that was a crazy time.
Okay, thanks for sticking around until the end. This season, we are looking to engage with you, our audience, and would love to know what topics and themes would be of interest to you. Also, who would you like to see as our guests? Perhaps you might be interested in coming on the show and talking with us. We would love to have you. Please share your thoughts and ideas with us via direct message on our Instagram. And for those of you who are not camera shy, please feel free to share a video with the hashtag the Vedic Conversation. Also, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. And if you found value in this episode, please share it with your audience and consider giving us a positive review to help others